if I would have never burnt out, if I would have never made photography my identity, if I would have never built a team around me and had employees and had an office lease, if I'd have never learned from them and they learned from me, I would never be here. I've had a couple of friends reach out recently and ask me, Jordan, what is Solas? So I'm going to do my best to answer that in this video. It's almost been exactly a year since I walked away from my photography and videography business. I'll probably have to create another video to explain that whole story and all the details surrounding it because it was such a crazy season and journey. But the most important thing is that I did it. I walked away. I don't know how I did it. I probably would do it differently or maybe wouldn't do it at all on some days, depending on how uncomfortable I've been in this season. But at the same time, it has been one of the most rewarding journeys to do what I would call follow God into the unknown, which I think from Scripture we would call faith. Faith is at times what happens when we have to close our eyes and walk, or when we have to lay down a bit of our reason and understanding for God's higher ways. I heard a pastor say the other day, God doesn't often operate in common sense because there's not much common about God. And I love that. I'm all for street smarts and operating in wisdom and budgeting and planning out your life and scheduling, or maybe I would say my girlfriend is really into all those things. I'm a little bit out there sometimes, but I'm all for those things. But there are clear moments in your life when God says, I'm here to defy what man would tell you to do. As Jesus would say, follow me. We see this moment in the Scriptures, which to me is almost unbelievable. We see Jesus, the Son of God, but really to these people, just a man, approach people in their workplace and in their careers. And we see them lay down everything at one call, which is to follow me. And I don't know what happens in that moment, because if I'm Peter, if I'm Matthew, I want to look at Jesus and say, tell me how much money I'm going to make. Tell me where we're going. What do I tell my parents when they ask what my job is now? But all these men laid down everything and followed Jesus. And I'm not even saying that that's what I did in this scenario. I'm just saying that it's a fascinating moment in Scripture. It's easier for us to just think, oh, they just followed Jesus because that's just what you do. But for me, it was a moment of following Jesus and saying the photography and videography business had become my identity in a way. It had become who I was, and I got into it. I got into photography as a hobby, and when your hobby becomes your job, sometimes you lose your hobby. If you're an artist and your art becomes your business, at times you lose the art. And so Solas, in the briefest sense, is the art of creating alone. In a world of social media and comparison and friends and collaborations and influencers, there's this interesting journey you can go on to say, as an artist, as a creator, like I can still create alone and I can do it for me. The shift has been for me, hey, I'm going to paint, I'm going to create, I'm going to shoot photos, but I'm doing it for me. I'm doing it for God. I'm doing it for the direct people in my life. Like, I'm doing it so that when my friends come over for dinner, I can open this photo book and show them like film photos that I took in New York. That is such an interesting concept compared to where we've been in the show everything and put everything out there world. An interesting part of my journey too was deleting social media and having a lot of people watch that journey on YouTube. But even more importantly than just deleting social media is the idea that as healthy individuals, we can reintegrate. We can bring ourselves back onto platforms, bring ourselves back online with the things that we've created in the Solas place. As a creator, entrepreneur, or artist, you have to decide what platforms are best for you and which ones you want to be on. But there is an idea of reintegration, and to go, hey, that time away from this platform or this thing, or that time away from this job or this type of art, actually made me stronger and made me better. So Solas is the journey of creating alone. When I left the business, it had become that for me. Business. That was it. Every single meeting was planned out, was timed out. There was an agenda. Every job had a budget. Every project was for a client. I lost me in that. So one of the funny things after the business was the only equipment that I really kept was this microphone, this recorder, and my iPhone tripod. And so the beauty of this Solas creating place is going to be me just creating it as an artist, me painting, me shooting film photography, writing poetry, and just inviting people into that space, not for them to watch me or to clamor or create a hero out of me, of what I'm doing, but to look into the camera and say, like, you can go to that place. Whether you're a business owner or an artist or a photographer or a designer or a barista, like, you can go to that alone place of creating. Because here's a truth that I discovered this year. I think most of us are afraid of silence, aloneness, and solitude because we're afraid that if we go there, nothing will happen. If we go there, it will be empty. Like, to say, I'm going to turn off the podcast, stop listening to the audiobook today, I'm going to turn down that coffee hangout, and I'm going to stay here. The fear is the unknown. Most of us have not lived our lives, even with pockets of alone time or solitude. I was talking to a friend of mine who had sold his business for a lot of money, a business that he had built over a decade. And I kind of, in a roundabout way, I said, "What are you doing now?" And he looked back at me and he said, he listed off some things he was doing around his house and at his farm, but he looked back at me and said, "An important principle that I learned this year was that good things come from long stretches of boredom. Great business ideas, great art, writing, creating comes from boredom, comes from having time to do those things, being available." So for me, Solas is the belief that I'm going to have my long stretch of boredom. I'm going to lay down certain business ideas that I have. I'm going to lay down certain aspirations that I have, certain projects that I want to put out, and I'm going to create. And I want to invite you along that journey with me. So when I left the season of owning the business, I heard this word pop in my head, and it was the word Solas. And to be honest, I didn't even think about it or look it up for months because I thought it was nothing. And eventually I just Googled the word Solas, and it turns out that Solas also means alone. I also found that with the word Solas was the Reformation, and with Martin Luther, the 5 solas of Scripture: faith alone, grace alone, Christ alone, for God's glory alone, and Scripture alone. Now, I don't necessarily agree or get into all of that theologically, but it was just interesting. I was like, this word had a life somewhere. And alone, new beginnings, the word has a Latin background as well. We'll dig more into that as we create content on the Solas journey. But when I sat down to write, here's what I wrote, and I think this will give you the best picture if you were to sit down with me and I were to say the journey I'm in of Solas and the journey I would invite you on if it's the right time. This is that journey. Solas, the art of creating alone. I left my employees, office lease, and clients. I stood in a dark hallway, not knowing what was next, only what I must leave behind. I made the money, built the brand, booked the jobs, but I somehow lost the art. What it did for me, how it made me feel, why I first began, the good I could do for others, the rest I could experience myself. So I sit and wait. The silence was almost unbearable. More waiting to nothingness. The line was cut, stuck out at sea. Solas, the word dropped into my spirit. Does it mean nothing or everything? Am I crazy or am I brilliant? Had I made a mistake? Or was I on the narrow road? Alone, in Latin, solas means alone. New beginnings, it also means. This is what I had lost. This is what I must find. The me that believed I could be, an artist all by myself. The contemplative man in his work shed. The painter at the city square. The mom in the unfinished basement. The locksmith up late at night. Alone but alive, creating, feeling, being, not for profit, but for good. We were never meant to create at this pace, to feed the unending algorithms, to impress people who will never care. If there's fame, profits, or gains, let it be, but not at the expense of me. Embrace the fear, receive the love, do something new for you, set out on an adventure, charge the hill, sit under the tree, let yourself think. Shut them out, the noise, opinions, and doubts. Just be. God says, I'm here. Just be. Welcome me. Solas. It's important to remember that in life we're on a journey. That it's easy for me to say, oh, well, the business became too much for me and I could talk about all the negative things. But the other reality is that it was a really good thing. It allowed me to not have a real job for 5 years. And I think we forget that in life on this journey, sometimes things are just vehicles. That my business was a vehicle that got me here. If I would have never burnt out, if I would have never made photography my identity, if I would have never built a team around me and had employees and had an office lease, if I'd have never learned from them and they learned from me, I would never be here. And I think what this idea of being on a journey does is it just gives you this little snack to sit with, this little meal of grace that just says, hey, you could beat yourself up for that relationship that didn't work or that job that fell through. Or you could say, you know what? It was a vehicle and it got me here. I don't know where Solas leads for me or for you. I don't know if it leads to another business for me or any other details, but I do know this. It's going to come from me shutting out the world, believing that if I get alone, something's there. And I'm not going to try to create a business or create a channel or a platform around something without actually letting it be something first. And so as we go on this journey, I'll be posting on the Solas Instagram, solas.artist, with film photography, poetry, and art. And I'll also be posting on the Solas YouTube channel. So you can follow along there if you're interested, but at the least just believe that you can create alone, that you can go to an alone place, a place of quiet. And when you get there, I think you'll discover that you're not as alone as you thought you would be. Hey, thank you for checking out this channel. It's weird to be back on YouTube again. And even with a new channel of Solas, it's just the art of creating, and I want to invite you in on that journey as well. Thanks for watching.